Okay, welcome folks to the meeting on commercial electronic vessel trip reporting training focusing on the ACCSP eTrips mobile application. This meeting is designed to help individuals to learn how to use this application to fulfill federal electronic vessel trip reporting as required in the NOAA Greater Atlantic region. My name is Andy Loftus. I will be doing a few slides of introduction and then turn it over to Captain Rick Bellavance, who will do the walkthrough of the actual application. About that, he will start with just a demonstration of what he does every day when he goes out on a fishing trip, just so you can see what it looks like once it's set up. And then he will back up and show you how to set everything up so you can get to the point that he's at right now. Just a few quick words of background and to make the webinar go a little bit smoother. Some reason there we go. A few webinar reminders. Please mute your line when you're not speaking. I think for the most part, people are muted at this time. But if you do unmute to ask a question or something, please remember to mute yourself afterwards. Please be respectful and on topic. This webinar is to be a training webinar, not necessarily a comment period on the action itself. It's something that is going to be taking in effect November 10th. So this is just helping you to get up to speed and learn how to begin using the application. We do have designated question periods during the demonstration, so Rick will stop periodically and ask if there are any questions about the previous section, so you might want to wait until that time to ask those questions. And please raise your hand if you know how to speak if possible. You can click on the hand button just to the right of your name, if you can see your name, or you can click on the little smiley face at the bottom of the screen, and you can choose the raise your hand icon, as you can see in these figures here. Very quickly, we're going to go through a very brief overview of what's going to happen on November 10th, but then talk about the basics you need to consider before you start your electronic vessel trip reports. A few quick questions if you have any, and then launch into the meat of the webinar, the demo of the eVTR app, eTrips mobile version 2. And then, as I said before, there will be time during the presentation for questions. So very quickly, beginning November 10th of this year, the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council and the New England Fishery Management Council did a joint action framework that will require commercial vessels with federal permits issued by GARFO to submit vessel trip reports electronically within 48 hours of ending the trip. A couple of asterisks there. Unless you're required to report sooner, as with some sector allocations, it will be 48 hours, and this does not apply to lobster-only permitted vessels. Electronic devices for reporting must be on board the vessel and in use during the fishing trip. And no paper VTRs will be accepted after November 10th. So everything is going to go completely electronic for submitting your VTRs. All other requirements for reporting will remain the same. So nothing else really changes. I will say there you may start to notice a few things that you think are different, particularly if you have dual permits with the Southeast region, for example. They aren't really different. It's just actually that some of the software will facilitate you doing dual reporting. So it's actually nothing else is changing for reporting purposes. So how do you get started before you even start with the eTrips mobile version 2? You choose a system. In this case, we're going to be talking about eTrips. Right now, and this will change as time goes on, but right now eTrips mobile is the only system that is currently capable of doing the dual reporting for both the GARFO and the CIRO Southeast region reports through a single application. So by that I mean when you fill out a VTR, you can hit submit, and the appropriate information will go to both Garfo and CIRO. The other applications are moving towards this, but right now it's only eTrips mobile that allows this reporting. Once you've chosen your system, you follow the system vendor's instructions to get started. That typically involves downloading the app from the App Store. So if you have an Apple device, that would be the Apple Store. If you have a Android or Google device, that would be the Google Play Store. And then you have your NOAA permits ready. You must have a NOAA Fish Online account to log in. So you get that. There's a web address at the very bottom. Again, this is actually being recorded, and it will be posted at the Mid-Atlantic Council website. So if you don't copy this down right now, you can go back and get that information there. But you do need that NOAA Fish Online account for all of the applications. You can also, I think, get that through the ACCSP, but that's the easiest way to do it. And then there's a number of videos available, particularly the eTrips has a tremendous number of resources available. And there will be some web addresses at the very end here that will point you to some of those resources if you have any questions or problems. I'll also take this opportunity to point out at the very lower right of my screen, you see the web address of the Mid-Atlantic Council's eVTR page. There is a number of links there to resources to get you started and help, regardless of the application that you choose. So if you just copy down that address, you can probably get pointed to the other resources that are available to help you out. So a couple of very quick questions that are commonly asked. What if you don't have cellular service or Wi-Fi while on the water? All systems that are approved by NOAA must allow data entry without an internet connection. They must store and retrieve reports, and then also have a reporting function and a summary report listing the dates and confirmation numbers and everything else. If you are, for example, boarded by law enforcement and they want to see evidence of your submission of VTRs, those will all be stored on your device. And then the Wi-Fi and the data connection is only needed when you're hitting the submit button. So when you actually upload and submit your report to the NOAA server, that's the only time you need the Wi-Fi or the data connection. So when you're out at sea, don't have a Wi-Fi connection, it will still capture all your information. You'll be in compliance. And so we also ask the question quite frequently, what if I lose my device or it stops working while I'm on the water? And law enforcement will treat it just as they do if you lose or destroy your paper form while you're at sea. And it's on a case-by-case basis. So I want to wrap up here with these links. This is some helpful resources. Again, the first one is the Mid-Atlantic Council's eVTR page. And the next one is the NOAA Fisheries Greater Atlantic Region webpage. That link is also available directly, again, from the Mid-Atlantic Council webpage if you don't want to copy that whole long string down. And then the ACCSP eTrips mobile specific information has, again, a number of videos available at the address you see there. And then finally, they do have a 24/7 helpline for the eTrips mobile with that number on the bottom of your screen there. And they are very good at responding and picking up the phone at almost any hour of the day. So before I turn it over to Rick, are there any questions that people have? Okay, I don't see any hands raised for any questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Captain Rick Bellavance to walk through the demo of the eTrips. So Rick, take it away.
Thanks, Andy. Can you hear me okay, and can you see my screen?
Yes to both.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for taking time out of your day and your busy schedules to join us this evening for a demonstration on the eTrips mobile reporting system for eVTRs. My name is Rick Belladance. I'm a fisherman from the Point Judith, Rhode Island. Not a government worker, I'm not a programmer or a developer. I'm someone who uses this application for my electronic vessel trip reports and my charter fishing business and my commercial fishing business. Mid-Atlantic Council thought it would be a good idea to hear from someone like me that uses the application in their real world settings and has learned how to use it and kind of fumbled through it. Pass some of my experiences along to the fishermen who have been using paper and will be using electronic vessel trip reports coming up in November. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to pass along what I've learned. I thought I would start my demonstration by just running through a trip like I would every morning when I head out. I'll select a commercial fishing trip and just to demonstrate, once the eTrip application is up and running and you've set it all up for your personal fishing industry or your fishing business, just how easy it is to go through and enter a trip report and send it off. And then once I do that, I will back up a little bit and then go through the application step by step and show you how I got to the point where I could just run through and manually enter a trip. So without any further ado, this is what I would do. I'd start up my phone and then I would open up my application. And this is the home screen that I would see when I open up my phone in the morning on the bridge of my boat. So I'm going to enter up completed trip, fishing trip, permit. Go from here. A lot of these fields are pre-populated from my previous trips, so it goes pretty quickly. Okay, so that exercise that I just went through is how I set up a trip. Now, the screen that I'm in now are the catches that I'll have for the day. So I've already established my trip details, so what the trip is about, what vessel, what fishermen, how many crew members, and so on and so forth. And then the effort part of my trip has already been created, which is the type of gear I'm using, the area that I'm fishing, different details about the effort. So this here screen is my catches screen. So we'll enter some catches for the day. Okay. And when I hit the summary, you can see that I've entered in some of the things that I thought I caught on that day. Once I get to the dealer at the end of the trip, offload those fish. I'm going to sell these all to the same dealer. There are ways to use multiple dealers and split catches and so on and so forth. Okay, so this screen here lets me know that I don't have any more catches to offload. On the bottom right is a trip report. Trip on the top is the trip that I just created. On the bottom of the screen is a little statement that you have to agree to, that you're not lying to anybody and you can get in trouble if you do. So you need to check that off. And if you notice, the submit button would turn black. At this point, I could submit the trip and I'd be complete for the day. I'm not going to do that now because this is my database, my own reporting system, so I don't want to submit a false trip. Anyway, that's what's involved in submitting an eVTR. So in my opinion, it's pretty easy to do. Just wanted to give you that quick overview of what you look forward to doing once we get up and running. So are there any questions right now regarding the process that I just went through? You may have to help me with that, Andy. I can't see everybody's screen. I don't know if there's a way that you could let me know if anyone has raised their hands because of my screen being up.
Yeah, I don't see any hands raised, Rick.
Okay. Okay, so what I've done now is I've started up an evaluation version of the Mobile 2, eTrips Mobile 2 application, just to give you an idea of what it would look like. I haven't used this application before. There's no preset favorites. There's no information on here yet. I'm just going through it as if it was your first time turning on the application. So this is the first screen that you'll see when you enter your username and password that you've gotten from the ACCSP or GARFO. Just let you know that safest data to track and vessel trip report, so you have to agree to that.
Rick, very, very quickly, Mr. Kriesman does have a question. He has a hand up.
Sure, go ahead. Don't hear Mr. Kriesman.
You have to unmute yourself. Tim? There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, yeah. In the beginning, it asked you to put an ending time for your trip.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you put in a start time and then you put an end time for your trip. We couldn't do that, you know, gill netting, because we don't know if we're going to be out for 2 hours or 12 hours.
Right. So I may defer to some ACCSP folks, but I think you can go back in and edit your end time at the end. So you could put an estimated end time in and then edit that once you know the actual time that you ended your trip. And you can correct me if I'm wrong anybody in there.
Okay, and yeah, I tried to raise my hand earlier also about will this eTrips cover our state reporting guidelines also for New Jersey?
Sure. So from my understanding is it would depend on your state. I fish out of Rhode Island, and this meets the requirements for my state's electronic reporting, but you would have to check in with your state folks to see, and if they don't now, chances are likely that in the near future they will. I don't want to speak for New Jersey at this time.
Right. I know the state reporting is through Safest electronically, so I'm going to say yes.
It very well may be. I'm sorry to say not the person to answer that, but there may be somebody on the phone here that could answer that a little better than me.
Yes, in fact, Julie Simpson has her hand up.
Hi, Andy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Tim. Yes.
Hello.
Rick is correct. You can go back and you can edit your trip end time. Also, as you saw him, he went through, he entered everything sort of in order because he knew the information. If you don't know your trip end time, which again, you may not, you can actually go in, put in all your catches and everything like that, and then go back and put in your trip end time just before you hit submit. So you can skip the question, even if it's required, you can skip it and go back and put it in when you know it. It is always best to check with your state, but you should be good.
All right. Thank you, Julie.
Great. Any other questions?
I don't see any, Rick, so continue.
Okay. So with the eTrips application, there's some startup work that needs to be completed prior to using the application to enter a trip that I think speed the process up quite a bit. They're not required, but they're definitely very, very helpful. And the eTrips application calls them favorites. So as you're looking at your home screen here, to the left of the word home is 3 white bars. They call that like a hamburger menu or something like that. If you tap that, it opens up a menu, and about closer to the bottom, about 3 up from the bottom, is a field that says favorites. So when you select that, there are a variety of different categories that you can enter your favorites in that are specific to your fishery. And that's designed to save you time from having to scroll through species, for an example. If you know that you only catch 6 or 7 different species on a regular basis, then you would enter those species in your favorites, and it'll shrink the amount of species that you see when you go to enter a fish and restrict it to those favorites. If you catch something offhand that is not regular in your daily fishery, but you're going to keep it or throw back or whatever you want to enter it into your trip, you can add that manually at that time. But your more common species, I find it helpful to put them into my favorites. And so in order to do that, you would select the category. So we can start with species right here. Tap on it, and you'll see that there's all different fish that you can select from. Tend to fish for stripers and blues, black sea bass. I'll just pick a couple. Sean. So I've selected my favorites. I can hit the back arrow. And I can go to the next category, which would be areas fished. Now there's a lot of different areas that you could fish in this country. So depending on where you live, you don't want to have to scroll through those every day when you enter your area fished. There's a white bar in the middle that says search. So I find it helpful to use that, and I can type in like a statistical area that I know I fish in quite a bit. So 539 is Rhode Island. I would select that as my favorite. Say so those would be my 2 favorite federal waters that I fish in. Going back to ports. Again, there's a whole bunch of ports that you could select from. I don't fish in Alabama. Put in, here we get. Scroll through Rhode Island. Pick a spot that you like. Fish out of Point Judith. We fished out of several ports. I have a boat in North Kingstown, so I could put that as a favorite as well. And again, there's all different types of gears you can use for commercial fishing. So you can scroll through and select favorites here, depending on what you use for gear in your fishery. Currently a hook and line fisherman, and I use some fish spots. Dispositions. So these are what happens to your catch when you're done with it. Generally select food if we sell it, but there's other dispositions that you could select from. Released alive is one. So sometimes we use them for bait, right? We'll catch some Grand Haven for bait and catch stripers or something. So put that one in there. Scrolling down to vessels. This is where you're going to find your vessel. So you would type in the search bar, the vessel. For this demonstration, the ACCSP has set up some test vessels for me to use, which are pre-permitted in different ways. So there's a GARFO vessel that just has permits for the Greater Atlantic region, and then there's a dual permitted vessel which would have say a dolphin and wahoo permit from the southeast, and then a bluefish permit from the GARFO region or summer flounder or something like that. So in that case, your reporting would need to take place for 2 regions, and so I'll select that vessel and we can go through a demonstration dual permitted vessel as well. I will also add, so those are federal vessels. If you have a state vessel, which is similar to me, I have a federal vessel and a state vessel, and you wanted to do your state reporting, you could hit the state button to the right of federal, and you could enter in manually your state vessel and select that as a favorite. So just to do that, the name of my state vessel is done. Not documented. And then there's a little button on the bottom that says display and favorites. So if you want to see that state vessel every time you look for a vessel, you would check that. If you didn't want to, you could uncheck it and you wouldn't see it. But I'm going to keep it in there for demonstration purposes. Another thing that's pretty handy is to be able to select favorites for the dealers that you commonly use, because there's a ton of dealers in our country, and I'll go to most of them. Go to Town Dock. Andergans. So I've selected those 2 dealers as favorites, and those are the only 2 that will come up when it asks me to enter my dealer during the offload portion of the trip. And then your licenses are, this has already been downloaded from the database that shows my permit, so I don't need to do anything there. So that's the process for selecting all of your favorites. And that will streamline your report entering quite a bit. I think it's a really great function in this application. So now that we've set up our favorites, we're going to go ahead and enter our first trip, just like I did in my demonstration earlier. So I'll take a little more time to go through each field and talk through what they mean and so on and so forth, and see if that generates any questions. But actually, even before I go here, the favorites portion, like I said, to me is one of the most important parts of the application. So maybe I'll stop here, Andy, real quick and see if there are any questions about how to set up favorites, or if my demonstration wasn't clear, if there's anybody that needs anything to be shown again.
Okay, are there any questions for Rick right now?
Got a thumbs up. Cool. All right.
I don't see any hands raised, Rick, so you can go ahead.
All right, I'll continue along. So we've decided to go fishing on a commercial trip. That's the trip type, and these are the different options that you have to choose from. The vessels, your vessel will be located in here. I'm going to start out with a GARFO federal vessel, and it pre-populates my GARFO federal permit for me. So that's what you need to do to set up your trip. The trip details, as you can see on the very top line, under trip details, it says that it's a commercial trip. I'm using this GARFO federal test vessel as my demonstration. The trip name, this is a box that's for your personal use. If there's something that you want to remember this trip by, or there's, you tried something different, a different configuration or different area or whatever, and you want to be able to remember the trip, you could type something in here manually, and that would be for your personal records. Anything in this white box wouldn't be transmitted to either the regional office or the ACCSP. It's just there for your help, differentiating between trips. So like as an example, on my charter boat business, I'll put my customer's name in there. And if I want to review what I caught with that customer, You look it up by name. Below that is the VTR number that was automatically built in by the application. Your trip activity is below that, and that's what you're doing during that trip. So under here is a drop-down menu that shows a bunch of different things that you might experience as you untie from the dock. You may end up having to turn around because the weather stinks, or you just be out to set gear. You're going to haul it back a different day. Most of the time, you're going fishing to go fishing, so that would be a fishing trip with efforts. Your end port. Remember that I went through my favorites, and I selected North Kingstown and Point Judith. So that's a lot smaller of a list than the entire port list up and down the coast. So that's an example of the functionality of the favorites. You can really shrink down your information you see by using the favorites function. Like that. The number of crew, 2 guys. Again, here's a notes field, notes box. If you wanted to type something in on to remember the trip by, something you just don't want to forget, there's a place for you to put that. And again, that would not be transmitted to the ACCSP or the regional offices. It's just for your use. Leave it blank. To some of our effort details. First field is your primary area fished. There are 4 different choices here. We'll select federal waters for this trip. As you can see, I've got a couple of statistical areas for my federal trip report. I fished off Rhode Island, that area 539. And ask you what kind of gear you used, just like your paper VTR. So this is kind of a neat thing too. Your gear quantity, your gear sets. Underneath each of those categories is a small explanation of what they're asking for in this field. And it changes depending on the type of gear that you use. So for hook and line, it wants to know how many hooks per line. If it was a gill net, if the gear type was a gill net, it may ask you number of meshes or number of nets that you have tied together or something like that, or how many pots are in your trawl. I'm not sure, but each one will give you a little heads up as to what they're looking for in this field. Putting 2 hooks on every line, and then the gear sets for hook and line. That's the number of lines. Fishing pole. Depth is pretty self-explanatory, but it is in fathoms on the commercial side. Fathoms. The location. This is similar to the location box that you're filling out on your paper VTR now. It's Latin long. I don't think they allow Loran anymore. If you notice to the right of the Latin long numbers, there's a little white icon, a wavy white icon. If you tap on that, it's going to create, show a map or a chart of where you are based on your location. And you can scroll around and kind of get in the general ballpark of where you were fishing. So I was fishing a little east of Block Island today, further out in 20 fathoms. Okay, and then that'll pre-populate your Latin long that most of your fishing activity took place. Again, another note box for your convenience if there's anything you want to remember the trip by. A tidbit, type that in there. Then your start time, your start date. So the trip starts today. Up here seems pretty explanatory. Time you leave the dock. And like Julie said, if you don't know the date or the time of your end trip, then you can skip it. You'll have to go back before you submit the report and fill it in, but you can skip it for now. And probably the same with your effort. So we'll try that. All right, now you're in your catches screen. I've selected those favorites. If you remember when we were looking at species, those are the 4 species I picked, so I don't have to scroll through all the different species to get to the ones I catch. Select a catch, put the quantity or whatever you caught, the unit of measure, changes by species. Some just allows you to put pounds. Sometimes they allow you to put count in there, but it depends on the species. Catch disposition, what you did with it. So it's food. That's what I select. Catch source, it defaults to standard. That's the most common catch source. You could, I guess for codfish, you could cart or standard. Those are your 2 options. Other species, you may see a longer list like research set aside or for hire or other things. But typically, I just leave it on standard. Seems to work fine. Save that catch. Caught some black sea bass too. Already pre-populated with all those fields. Hit save. Now, at any time, if I want to look and see what I entered, I can hit the summary button, and that'll show the 2 entries that I just made: 50 pounds of sea bass and 100 pounds of cod. Let's just say I looked at it and said, oh, that's not supposed to be 50, that's supposed to be 60 pounds of sea bass. I can go to the catches button to the right of summary, select the black sea bass, it'll bring it back up again, and then I can modify that 50 pounds to 60 and hit save. Go back to my summary and you can see that it's changed. Okay, so that's your trip. Before I get into the offload portion of the trip report, are there any questions on creating your trip details, your effort details, or entering your catches?
I don't see any hands, Rick.
Rolling right along. Okay, so now we get to our dealer and we want to offload our catch. Hit the offload button and you'll see in the middle of the screen it shows my 2 different catches. Those are my catches that have not been offloaded yet. I want to create a new offload. I've got my sea bass and I've got my codfish. If I hit the select all button, I can sell those off to the same dealer. So we'll do that for this example. Select all, and you'll see both of those yellow boxes are checked. Now I shift over to the details of that offload. I'm going to sell it to a dealer. Offload point is Point Judith. My dealer built a town dock today, and the date that I sold it is the 15th. Same day, 1-day trip. So that's how you would enter that. And it says you have no more catches to offload. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to submit this report, and it's probably going to bark at me because I didn't finish the trip end time. We'll see what happens. Yep. See how there's a red line underneath the trip that I entered? It says trip start or end time not set. So that's your reminder that you didn't put your end time in. So you can go back. Summary. Under your trip, you can see that I have my end time. I didn't enter that earlier. I skipped by it. Pretty early day. We loaded up. Ended our trip at 12:42. Now that's been entered. I'll try to do my trip report. The error comes up because we didn't put our hours fished. A reminder. Effort. Hours fished in effort. Let's say we fished for 4 hours of that trip. That was the one that had the little red icon next to it that we skipped. So that's how you are reminded. If you choose not to enter a field, it'll give you little hints as to what you forgot to fill out before it lets you submit it. Now we can try to offload it. Send our trip report in. See, there's no more red warnings or complete fields. It'll allow me to check off this little box here. That's the same language that's on the end of your paper VTR now, that you agree to when you sign it. And then I could hit submit. Actually, this is the eval, so see what happens. Success. So that tells you that you're done. That's what's involved in submitting a GARFO eVTR and eTrips. Any questions on that?
Yes, Dewey, you have your hand up. Unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And, thank you, Rick. My question was, how do you, can you go back to your gears entered, and what happens if you use 2 gears during the same trip? You might have already told that, but I just got on here not too long ago.
No, not a problem. I just used 1 gear. So what I might do, favorites. Select. So let's take the time to go through another trip and see if we can't figure it out. Trip. Gear type. So what you're saying is, if you do a part of your trip with hook and line, and then you do part of your trip with a beam trawl, just as an example, right? You do 2 different gears. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to put some times in here to so long. Okay, so when you're excuse me, when you're in your catches, you would go through your hook and line gear part of your trip. So you caught 25 pounds of sea bass, and now you're gonna use your beam trawl. So if I do this right, on the bottom here, you'll see some effort. You already hit that button, effort, and then next to hook and line, there's a little plus. That. You can change your area. This is completely doing a new effort. So you're in federal waters, same general area, but now your gear type would be beam trawl. So this is a good example of how the program kind of hints you along on what type of information it's looking for under gear quantity if you're using a beam trawl. So it wants to know the number of nets towed per set. 1. And then how many tows did you make with your beam trawl? 5. It's going to want to know your sweep, foot root length, and length. I don't use a beam trawl, so I'll make something up. Your mesh size. I guess it's probably large mesh, right? I don't know. And then the depth. So on. You stayed in that same location, or say you moved, right? You moved south or something. You could put your new location in there. So that's how you would go through adding an effort to this trip report. Select
Thank
catches. You're welcome. And caught some codfish with your beam trawl. Pounds of cod, safe. So now we can go to an offload of that commercial trip. We got 2 different gear types, but the catches don't matter how we caught them, right? We can go to 1 dealer, we can go to 2 dealers. So this is a good time to kind of look at what if you wanted to sell to 2 different dealers. Select my black sea bass. Instead of hitting select all, I'm just going to hit my black sea bass because I'm going to sell that to 1 dealer. Tails. Still came into Point Judith. Sold those to Handergans on the 15th. But my cod going somewhere else. Cod still in Point Judith, but I'm selling them to the town dock. That's who wanted them. And that's that. So I've used 2 different types of gear in 2 different areas, caught 2 different species, and sold them off to 2 different dealers. That's how that would work. See if it goes through. So that's that. So that lets you know that that worked. I didn't forget anything, and it had 2 different efforts in it. Is that okay, Dewey? Was that too fast, or do you want me to go through that again?
No, that's good. I would just, that's good. I got an understanding of it now. And maybe it'll come a little later, but I was wondering about, I think your setup here is by a phone, correct? I was wondering about like a iPad. I have a captain that's, his eyes aren't the best. And I was just wondering,
Good question. Yeah, so you can use this application on a phone, and that's what I'm using mine on, is my phone
Yep.
here. It's an iPhone, but I also have an iPad, and I can use it on that as well. It looks a little different. It's laid out a little different. It's bigger, right? So
Right.
that address some of the concerns of your captain that doesn't see as good. And the flow of it is basically the same, and all the information that you enter is the same. The colors and the look of everything are pretty much the same.
My next question, and would be: is there a certain, and I'm probably is you know, what is the standard of iPad that's needed to perform these tasks? Like, what's the minimal amount or something? And maybe that might be later on or do it offline. But I'm just curious about, you know, if I went to buy an iPad tomorrow, what's the minimal standard that iPad's got to meet to be able to do these applications? Maybe that's a simple question.
Yeah, it might be a simple question. I don't have an answer for that. I think I would want to somebody at the ACCSP who built the software to understand. Maybe they have a better way of explaining the minimum requirements of the devices, right? Over time, I know I use an iPhone 7, and then my iPad, I don't know how old it is. It's a couple of years old though.
Yeah,
They do update them.
I can do that offline. I don't want to hold up somebody's time, but yeah, I'm still in the Flintstone. I got an iPhone 5, I think. So
yes, you probably have to get a little bit newer iPhone than that.
All right, thank you.
Jeff White, I think you can add something to that.
Thank you, Andy. And yeah, any iPad you're going to buy in a store today should certainly cover the needs of the application. And I think Allison just added something in chat about which item will answer that. And I'm sorry, I'm not seeing chat at the moment.
This is Julie. The iOS operating system needs to be 11 plus, and it's the operating system. And then the Android operating system needs to be 8 plus.
Hey, is that iOS operating system? Is that needs to be 11 plus for iPad, correct? That ain't for a phone, right?
Correct. And it's the operating system. Dewey, this is Julie. Do you want, if you want, I can follow up with you by email too and
Oh,
give you
okay.
more details.
Yeah, I don't want to hold up too much time, but yeah, that'd be good. I'll probably start next week following up with some emails. Kind of busy right
Sure,
now.
absolutely.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
No, but that is a good point that it is the operating system, not the model of the iPhone. As Rick mentioned, he's got an iPhone 7, and his operating system is obviously above 11. So you can use older iPhones. I don't know, Dewey, if the 5 runs that or not, but it's the operating system needs to be an 11 plus for an iPhone.
Yeah, I wouldn't be using this old phone here. It'd probably be an iPad for the vessel. I appreciate it.
Are there any other questions? Rick, while
Yeah.
you're on this, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so you're gonna fill out that report before you sell your product, correct?
So
You hear me?
Yep, I do. I fill out my report at the dealer, like the catches and all that stuff. It's you're by the regulation, you're supposed to have it filled out while you're at sea, right? So I fill out
Correct.
everything I can. I estimate my catches as I'm heading in, and then when I get to the dealer, I get my layout slip, and then I can go in and edit those catches to
Right,
match my dealer
you
slip.
changed okay. Yeah, you just changed what you estimated. Because I'm
Yeah.
on a scallopper, so it runs a little different, you know?
Yeah,
It's hard to
right.
get pretty accurate, you know? You get close, but
Yeah,
all right,
and that's
cool.
what I do too. I know a toad's 100 pounds, so I figure, oh, I got 2 totes of bluefish, that's 200 pounds, and they weigh it out, and it's 175 or 225. I just change it.
All right, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and along those lines, remember it's you have 48 hours to submit your report. So if you do offload your catches and then need to update the weight or something like that, you have up to 48 hours to do that. So you'd still be in compliance. I just also wanted to point out, Rick, while you're on this screen is what if you were boarded and law enforcement wanted to see your evidence of your VTRs in the past, they would see this. Is that correct?
That's what I would show them. Yep, my logbook.
Okay.
I have another question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, if I'm out to sea, and of course, I don't know if my device on the boat, I don't have Wi-Fi. So, and of course, we don't have Wi-Fi if I'm way out to sea. So how am I gonna do my book report, on this device?
That's a great question. So for an application to be approved by NOAA for using for eVTRs, it has to be able to have the information entered and stored on your phone or your iPad or whatever you're using until you can get into internet range. So you can enter all the stuff, it'll be there, and then only when you have to submit the trip do you need the internet connection. So you'll be able to enter it all without a Wi-Fi connection at all.
Okay, beautiful. Now, we have boat tracks. Now, is there any way that we could set up the boat tracks to do the same, thing that I'm doing on my phone?
I don't have a VMS on my boat. I'm not really familiar with how that works. I could try to defer to somebody else on the call that might have a little more knowledge on the VMS systems. But I think I'll just hold off and see if there's anybody on the call today that could help with that.
Yeah, is there anybody that can answer that question? Tim, I see you do have your hand up, but I'll come back to you. Anybody from NOAA or from ACCSP that might know that? Barry?
Yeah, I'll give that a shot, Andy. So it is possible. And so the new VMS companies, they're distributing tablets with their programs. However, we've heard anecdotally that they just aren't working well in terms of when these eVTR apps are getting loaded onto the VMS tablets. So, although conceptually it should work, apparently people have had struggles doing so. So, at this point, it's probably smart to not recommend going that route.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, and I will just also clarify, there is one other time when you will need internet connection. That is when you're setting up your eTrip. So when you're first setting it up with your favorites and things like that, you need to have the internet connection to pull those down. But after that, you can use it at sea with no problem. And then you only need internet connection once you return to port and go to submit your trip.
Yes, I'll work on that to get my favorites where they belong. And yes, okay, thanks for that too.
Okay, thank you. Tim, you had a question? Unmute yourself, Tim. There you go.
My assumption with the VTRs originally was that has to be filled out and signed before you hit the dock. You can't readjust weights after you're there. They want to see a finished trip when you hit the dock. It's only an estimated weight. So you guys are talking about readjusting weights after you pack out?
Sure. So I do estimate my weights, and so that meets that that requirement, right? I estimate I have 100 pounds of bluefish or whatever, but the program allows you to go and change it when you get your pack out slip and it's got the accurate weight on it.
But enforcement boards you with a paper copy, and it's not filled out completely when you hit the dock. You know, they're going to wonder, well, are you trying to hide something? You know, because you wrote down you had 100 pounds of bluefish and you really have 175. You can't go back and change it once it's written on the paper. So that's why I'm wondering how this is going to work out, because I don't think enforcement's going to buy it if you're, you know, happen to be off by a few 100 pounds.
Well, that's how I do it. I think we all try to be pretty accurate with our guess, right? And so
yeah, well, it's tough when you're like, I have a gillnet boat and you do a mixed species, and you know you got 1,000 pounds of fish and you've been throwing croakers and butterfish and bluefish and weakfish and you know who knows God what in the box all at once, and it's just like a best guess at pound wise. But all right, well that's
yeah. So I mean, in the past, I would do the paper VTR, and I wouldn't change it, right? I would just send it in. Now I have the option to change it. So I guess theoretically you could leave it at your estimate and submit the trip report with your estimate.
Right, because they're only supposed to be estimates.
So you could do that. I think my own personal preference is to change it to match the dealer report.
Okay.
So I've never been told that was wrong or right. It's just something that I thought, well, I'm allowed to do it on the program, so I might as well.
Right. Yeah. Well, I did.
Feel more
run
comfortable
with the paper copy as the amount wasn't filled in, because I used to write them down off my pack out sheet, and they said no, it's got to be done before you throw the fish up on the dock. So I'm trying to avoid just trying to avoid an issue down the road.
Yeah, I hear you. Yep, for sure. So again, you could just leave it at your estimate and submit it that way. I don't think that would be no different than your paper report now.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Great. Any other questions for Rick? I don't see any other hands up, Rick.
Okay. So we still got a little bit of time here. If it's all right with you, Andy, I could try to go through a trip report for somebody who's dual permitted. So that means they have a Garfo permit for like bluefish or summer flounder or something. And they also have a Southeast Regional Office permit for, snapper grouper or dolphin wahoo or something like that. So that report is going to be a little different than the Garfo only report. There's a little bit different information that's required. So if you think it'd be helpful, I could run through a trip using a vessel that's dual permitted.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we'll see how this one goes. Still going to be a commercial trip. And in this example, I'm going to use a dual permitted federal vessel. So it's got both CIRO and GARFO permits. Already you can see there's some differences. Because of the Southeast Regional Office permit, you'll be required to type in your last name, first name. It also wants to know your days at sea. So if I remember the directions right, if it's less than 24 hours, you enter 0. And if it's 24 hours or more, you know, up to 48, you put 1, and so forth. So I'm going to do a less than 24-hour trip. 0. This, for those of you that have Southeast Regional Office permits, you may be familiar with the trip expense section. So it's my understanding that the Southeast region selects a percentage of their permit holders to, in addition to their catch and effort portion of their trip, they're also requested to submit expense information. So if you're one of those fishermen, you would get a separate letter saying that you're part of that group, and then you would have to fill out these additional expense section questions here. So the very first one is, yes, you're part of it, so you need to fill it out, or no, you can leave the questions blank. So I'll hit the no for this example, but I can scroll through some of the questions that you may be familiar with. These are the same questions that are on the bottom of the paper VTR for the Southeast region now. A bunch of them. And then there's a note box here, but that's not something that would go to CIRO. That's for your personal use. So, areas fished. It's pre-populated from my last trip that I did, so I don't have to re-enter any of that. I may select a different gear. So pot, fish pots this time. Number of traps hauled per effort. Number of strings hauled. Total number of pots in the water. Pot entrance, right? So that's your escape hatch. Something. And then your bottom depth. The Southeast region also requires that you enter a target species. So you could go through, this isn't in your favorites, this you have to enter manually each day. So we're going for scup. Location, closer to the island. Starting this trip today. Going to put the end time in. We discussed that you could skip it if you wanted to, but I'm going to, and I know when I'm coming home. These are all the exact same questions as the GARFO only permit. Okay, so top here you can see I'm using fish pots. And those are the species that are in my favorites. So this could be a good example to say, oh, I didn't put scup in my favorites, so I'm going to have to search for scup. Type it into that white box. Pop. So you select scup. 400 pounds of scup. Market grade. for large scup, 10 pounds. And we're gonna, our catch disposition will be food. Save that. You could also say, going back some guys, yeah, threw back 100 pounds or 10 pounds. So alive. Those are your discards, and so on and so forth. So the summary of my catches would be the 400 pounds that I kept, 10 pounds I threw back. This may not let me do, because, oh no, I did my time. Sold to dealer. Ports are still part of my favorites, nothing different there. Same dealers. Sold. That one. So that's the variation, right? If you happen to be one of those fishermen that has the dual permits, you'll see that there's just a little bit extra information that they're asking you for. Any questions on a dual permitted vessel?
Rick, I will just clarify that this version of eTrips for the dual permitting will be available shortly. If you download eTrips tonight, it will not allow you to do the dual permitting, but it will be in the next couple of weeks. It'll be updated so that it will.
Oh, thanks for that, Andy. Yep, that's important.
Yeah.
Great.
Dewey?
Yeah, I probably should know this answer, but does any of these systems allow you to do HMS, Garfo, and the South Atlantic Council at the same time?
So the answer is yes. eTrips does allow you to enter HMS species.
Thank you.
Yeah, I could actually let's look. See what happens. The bluefin tuna. Food. Okay, so my disposition is food. So you can see that because I kept it, it now enters, it has all of these new fields for HMS that would be required to be passed along to the HMS folks. If your disposition is that you released it, it doesn't ask you for all those questions. It just records that you released a bluefin. But we'll go through the exercise of keeping it and selling it.
And while you're doing that, Rick, I'm going to ask Julie to, she's got a comment about the HMS reporting.
Yep, thank you, Rick. Sorry to interrupt you, but Dewey, just so you know, we're still working with, right now, this is compliant with the commercial fishery logbook in the Southeast, but we're still working with the Southeast to make sure that all of these questions align correctly with their HMS logbook, which is that logbook is a little bit different than their commercial fishery logbook. And so it will depend on the species that the permits that you have for HMS. But our goal is to make it compliant with everything by the November 10th rollout.
Okay, because I know particularly to our area down here in North Carolina, we have multi permitted fishermen at different times. It's both HMS, some Garfo, and the South Atlantic at the same time. You know, so I'm just getting into it and meeting the different things here, learning. So I'll be able to spend some time in the next couple of weeks on getting updated on what has to be done for us around here.
Yeah, and we just want to follow through with the agencies because we want to make sure we provide you with a form that meets your compliance, but we don't want to go overboard and ask you extra questions if you don't need to be answering them.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
So I'm going to look through these fields just to demonstrate. This is what the application has in it for bluefin tuna currently. Don't be surprised if they change over time as the ACCSP and the HMS folks smooth out what information that they're looking for. But this is currently what they have in here. See if it worked. Bluefin tuna, one for food. Cool. Sold to dealer. Probably looking for a new dealer. Cheapers. Bait sold. Okay, so that's how you would enter an HMS species, at least bluefin. You know, each one. I did a couple of marlin this year, and they're recreationally caught marlin, and they are slightly different than the bluefin, and then the bluefin that I caught were just like that. So you can enter HMS stuff.
Okay, Tim, you had your hand up a minute ago. Did your question get answered? Tim, are you still there? Are you speaking or not? Okay. And are there any other questions for Rick?
So I stopped on this screen. If you remember, when Dewey asked me the question about the bluefin tuna, I entered that bluefin tuna on a trip that I had already built and submitted, right? Just as an example to run through it so that he could see it. I sold that off to a dealer, and I went to resubmit the trip, and this is what you'll see. So if you modify your existing trip that's already been submitted in any way, it's just going to put up this little screen that says you're reporting a trip that you already submitted. So it just wants to make sure that that is your intent. When you hit continue, I'll upload it, and now that trip has been overridden. The new information that you edited.
Julie?
Thanks, Andy. I just wanted to clarify my own comment to Dewey about the HMS. What we're working on is the HMS logbook, which is specific to the commercial. For the for-hire fishermen, if you're doing for-hire trips and not commercial trips, the application that's available today on the store is already compliant with both the GARFO, the CIRO, well, and I guess it's more than both. It's already compliant with GARFO, CIRO, and HMS. So the parts that we're working out are only on the commercial side at this point. The for-hire is already compliant with all three.
Thanks for that, Julie.
Thank you, Julie. Are there any other questions for Rick? Would you like him to show something over? This recording will be available on the Mid-Atlantic Council's website That's mafmc.org/eVTR. And then you go to the commercial section, and it'll be posted there probably in the next couple of days, within the next couple of days. So you can review the video and skip ahead to where you want to see it, and skip back and pause and things like that. So, and we will have a couple of other workshops later on, as we get closer to November 10th. So if you want to look at it again, you can. All right. Rick, is that it? Does that wrap up the demonstration you had?
Yep, that's what I had in mind. Like you had mentioned, we'll be doing a couple more of these, and if folks on the line just want to pass the information around, if folks are interested in seeing how this one works or any other applications, there's several opportunities to kind of start to get familiar with the applications that you're going to need in November, and probably best to start earlier, get the hang of it. Once you do, it's a breeze, but it's like anything else. Like when you get a new plotter, it takes you a little while to figure out how it works compared to your old machine. This is no different. So if you get going on it a little bit early, it'll be smooth sailing for everybody. That's my advice. And there's I don't know if you had a screen with the help desk number on it, Andy, but that's a pretty valuable resource. So folks are able to call that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Get someone there to help them answer, even if you hung up on a little question here and there, or starting from scratch and starting the whole thing up. They'll help you out. That's all I had.
Okay. There was a at the end of the when I first did the presentation at the beginning of the webinar, there was a slide with helpful resources. That mobile helpline phone number was 1-800-984-0810. So if you do have any questions as you're setting it up, and want to get some help, again, it's a 24/7 helpline, so you can call that number. Okay, if there are no other questions, Rick, thank you very much. Everybody that joined in, thank you very much. Again, hopefully there is a question. Tim, before we go ahead. Tim? We can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself if you are trying to talk. Okay. Tim might have some issues. So, okay, yeah, if you have any questions, go to those resources page, again, mafmc.org/eVTR, and then hit the commercial button, and there'll be a lot of different links to the NOAA, to the GARFO site, how to get a permit, or a Fish Online login ID, how to get started with eTrips and other software applications. And if you have any questions still after that, you can submit a request for information. So with that, I guess we'll end for the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.